Hello. I have the extreme honor and pleasure to present to you today these three very important individuals. Today we're talking about anti-Semitism. I actually did a pulse read on my Instagram, and a lot of people had a lot to share. And I know that the three of you are going to be adding insight here before we move forward. I would love for each one of you to introduce yourselves, and I will start with Ellen.
Okay. I'm Ellen Roth. This is my sign name. I was born and raised in New York City, and now I'm living in Washington, D.C.
Awesome. Sofia?
Hello, I'm Sofia Seitchik. I was born in Samarkand, Uzbekistan. I went to the school for the deaf in St. Petersburg, Russia, and then I moved to New York City when I was 16, and now I'm living here in Maryland.
Well, hello. And go ahead.
Hi, it's wonderful to see everybody. It's Yehoshua Soudakoff. I was born in Los Angeles, California. I moved to New York 5 years ago, and now I'm living in Israel.
And I have to ask, what time is it in Israel?
It's midnight.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it's an important topic. I had to join.
Oh, I agree. Very important. So I think there are some people who may be familiar what anti-Semitism means, and it's, oppression against Jewish individuals, but what exactly is it? And I know there's some history here that ties to anti-Semitism. So I would love for Yehoshua to go ahead and start.
Absolutely. Anti-Semitism is any thought or any belief or any behavior that's against Jewish people. Historically, there have been different forms of anti-Semitism. We've seen people who are against ethnicity because of the color of your skin, economic reasons, reasons of status, and racial reasons as well. And examples in Nazi Germany, they viewed Jewish people as a subspecies. And even to this day, anti-Semitism have different forms against Zionism, which means against Jewish people. That is another word for anti-Semitism. And a lot of times people can get confused on if we would call something anti-Semitism, or is it just someone's opinion, or is it really that way? And there's a person by the name of Nathan Ashansky. It's a person who's a famous political leader. They grew up in Russia, and they had the 3D rule. They moved to Israel. If there were 3 Ds, if they had any one of those, they could be called anti-Semitic. So the first one is de-legitimization, which means our identity, just like any other group, a Black person, Asian, we all have our own identities. But if someone's telling you you can't do something, that means I'm not equivalent to anybody else. So that's a form of anti-Semitism. Another one is demonetization. And what that means is that you're viewed as something that's not human, overtly evil. So there's a famous quote that Jewish people control the world. Jewish people are rich. Jewish people are in collusion with each other. And that's definitely a form of anti-Semitism. The last D is a double standard. So if we're saying something about Jewish people, other people maybe can do it, and we're saying the same thing about them, but we'll say that Jewish people can't do it. So that's the 3D rule.
Thank you for that. I know there's a lot of us that are learning, in history classes as we go to school. We've learned about the Holocaust. And I would think that it is actually probably the first apparent example of anti-Semitism. And that's probably something that we all can remember. And obviously that was some years ago. And some may think that, well, no, it doesn't exist today. I have people messaging me saying, absolutely not. It still exists in this day and age. And I know the three of you do have some personal experiences to share. And so I kindly ask if you don't mind sharing your experience of oppression for being Jewish.
Yes, this is Sofia. So when I moved to America as a refugee, I grew up in Uzbekistan, and it was during the Soviet Union communist regime, and we weren't allowed to practice our own religion. And so we had to hide the religion that we were practicing, especially as a Jewish person. When the Soviet Union, they called it a nationality. So when they announced that it was actually Russia, we still were considered victims, ironically, because we had to put down that we were Jewish. I experienced oppression in school. When they would call the students in roll call, they would call all the names and they were all Russian names. My name was Jewish. And they could tell immediately that I wasn't Russian like everybody else. I didn't feel safe there. I was always attacked, singled out. If another child got in trouble, I would be singled out because I was Jewish. So growing up, I felt that attack, and I ended up coming over here so I could practice freely and practice my religion here in the States. And it was great because I ended up learning a lot here. And my son, during middle school, he was profiled because he has curly hair and clearly he is Jewish. We lived in Pennsylvania. It's a mostly white neighborhood. So they bullied him and made fun of him because he was Jewish. And so I had to pull him out of school. And then we ended up moving here to Maryland. And we've lived here where there's a lot more diversity. And things have been a lot better, a lot less bullying that he's experienced. Every once in a while, someone will make a joke. There's this one song that kids play. It's Little Darky. And the song is called Holocaust. And there's a lyric on there that says, bitch, bitch, let's burn in the chambers. And my son heard the song and he said, this is not acceptable. And the student said, get over it to him. It's just joking around. And looking at these things, I realized that Jewish people and anti-Semitism are still happening today.
I'm so sorry to hear that. You know, I in this day and age, I can't believe that that's still happening. I do have a follow-up question, but I also want to give opportunities to Ellen to go ahead and share if you'd like to.
Yes, I was born and raised in New York City. First, I was in Brooklyn in a neighborhood called Crown Heights. And there's a very Orthodox community over there. My father's side of the family is Orthodox and my mother's side of the family is conservative, but 90% of them are gone. They actually passed away in the Holocaust in Germany. And they died in the ovens. And so my mother's mother ended up leaving their home that they had for 1,500 years. They had a farm and a winery and a bread making factory. And the soldier told my mom, you're going to have to leave or I'm going to shoot all of you. You have 30 minutes. My mother fled and she ended up coming here to New York and had my mother, who was the last. They all spoke German. My father came from Vienna, Australia through Canada and ended up in New York. And that's how my mother and father met. So they might be from the same family. But I remember asking them where they were from, and they told me that they ended up being from Poland. And I asked my mother, I said, you were from Germany. And she told me that she was there during Nazi Germany. And I asked her about what was going on. And she had the basic vocabulary. What she tells me is that they just didn't like Jewish people. And I said, really? I said, did people hate us? But why? And she said, why did they destroy us? And she said, it was a long story. And it was a lifelong quest for me to understand from that point why the world hated Jewish people and why they would use Jewish people to save face. So things like if there was a problem going on, they would target the Jewish people. And there were so many things that had happened growing up that I had noticed along the way. And I had seen things that were overt and covert that had happened. Even when I was little, I remember the first thing that I recognized was that the world hated Jewish people. And I told my mom, I don't want to be Jewish. And she said, you are Jewish. And I accepted from that moment on that I am Jewish. And to this day, I still struggle to find my place in the world. what happened with Black Lives Matter 2 years ago really shook me. It shook the world. Social justice movements and restorative justice. And I understand completely what was going on. And I just felt like I really connected. The BIPOC community is growing for these reasons above. The white community, they want to preserve their way of life or whatever. But as a Jewish person, we're different. Nazi community destroyed half of my mom's family. And the BIPOC community says I'm white, but I'm not, I'm Jewish. So it's very complicated for me.
Yeah, I definitely want to dig deeper into that. And I'm wondering if that's kind of the reason why people think anti-Semitism doesn't exist because you classify as white, Anglo-Saxon, but that's not the case, right? I mean, we've got serious anti-Semitism happening. We have genocide that is happening, and I'm sure you guys have some type of experience even to this day. Yes, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead and share yours, Yeshua.
I do want to explain some examples of oppression, and not just the Holocaust, but even to this day. I told you I lived in Israel, and I'm also a rabbi in the deaf community here. And I'm connected with people all over the world. And every time Israel has a conflict here, and I live here, so I know that we didn't start it. For example, there's rockets that are coming from Gaza to Israel, and we have to hide in the bomb shelters and things like that. And then all of a sudden, the Jewish community around the world is not Israel, mind you. I want to make that clear, not Israelis. Maybe it's people that have never even touched Israel before, but they're so nervous and they're seeing these protests, and there's people that are trying to get bombed, even in the jobs that they're working, or even at restaurants. People are trying to break windows, and different things are happening in Jewish communities around the world. Jewish deaf people contact me telling me that they feel nervous, and Israelis who are deaf move out. They say, why did your country do these things? And I'm looking at them and I'm saying, why are you blaming me? The only reason why perspective is being twisted maybe is because of media. And not maybe, but the media doesn't tell the full story, and they blame us for what we didn't do. And that type of thing happens often. And just like I said, anti-Semitism changes over time. And now Israel is being set up as a new country since 1948. And before that, since the Holocaust, people didn't appropriately even say I'm anti-Semitic. But now they're saying I'm anti-Israel, and that's the same type of hatred.
And did you experience that type of oppression personally and that marginalization?
Interestingly enough, I actually would like to ask Ellen and Sophia, but for me, it's different because I identify strongly as Jewish. I look Jewish. I have a beard. I wear a yarmulke. So people will not tell me Jewish jokes or say things like that in front of my face because they know clearly that I'm Jewish. But I imagine the both of you may not experience the same thing because they don't realize you're Jewish until
Yes.
later.
Ellen here multiple times. I've definitely had that experience because I don't look the Jewish, right? I look white, or where I grew up, and just how I social. I have to say, people growing up people would make comments like, "Oh, they're smart because they're Jewish," or "Oh, they have money because they're Jewish," and I'm like, "Oh, you're talking about me?" They're like, "No, I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about them." I'm like, "But them is me, and me is them. You are talking about me," and they kind of just brush it off, right? And we're friends, and I have to work with certain individuals who talk like that. It definitely does bother me. The Jewish jokes and sometimes conversations that are happening between two people I see, don't know if I should say something. And more times than not, I don't say anything. I kind of just keep my mouth shut, and those happen plenty of times.
This is Sophia. So in Uzbekistan, when I grew up in an Islam country. So we got along because we look similarly. We had the same hair. And so in the same style of dress. So we did get along. And in Russia, it was very hard to even hide what I looked like because I had dark hair, and they always called me a dirty Jew. Or they said, oh, you think you're so smart. So it was just those little things that I experienced growing up. And then I moved to America. And being Jewish, I realized that I was welcomed here. But if I was extremely involved in anything that was in a leadership role, they would say, oh, you think you're so smart because you're Jewish. You think you know everything. So it was just those little things that would happen. And it really depended on where I was and who I was around. But even to this day, I struggle when I fill out applications or forms. And I think to myself, do I check out that I'm white because I was born in Asia, and I'll just check off something just to check it off. So I'll just check off white because it's easy and simple and then move on, But it's always a piece of me that's conflicted inside, that piece of my identity.
Speaking of jokes, I think frequently a common thing that I'm seeing on my Instagram response is that people say they joke about how Jewish people are so cheap. And I personally have had this conversation with someone who is Jewish, and they went through a lot, through the Holocaust, and people who went through the Holocaust had to literally rebuild and start new lives. And people take that as kind of like, yeah, that's how they live today. But that is just one example of, maybe they say it's just a joke, but they don't realize how insulting it is to the Jewish way of life. And it really discounts everything that they have went through historically. So when you see someone make a joke on what they think is a joke or comments like that, I know some of you kind of mentioned that you don't say anything, but how does that really make you feel?
Oh, you can go ahead.
Ellen,
Yeah.
here, it's painful.
Yeah. I think applying the 3D rule, the double standard.
Mm-hmm.
So do I ask the question, are only Jewish people cheap, or are there cheap people in any other culture? Because we're all human. There's a lot of diversity. Some people who want to keep their money and save their money, and some people who want to spend it. So thinking that applies to only Jewish people and not other people is a form of anti-Semitism.
Yeah, I'd have to say for no reason. People like to blame Jewish people for absolutely no reason. And it's like they like to pick on, it could be a case of jealousy. It could be that it's just a generation kind of learning and understanding that maybe parents and grandparents have spoke bad about Jewish people, when following the Ten Commandments, and there are others that don't want to follow the Ten Commandments. And during the crucifixion of Jesus, they were split into groups, right? And one group was mad, and the church held Jewish people accountable for that anger. And so if you frame it that way, it's a little bit different, right? It's not us, it's others, and that's what we were labeled. And so if you really look at the history books and you dig deep into people's thoughts and attitudes, and you try to like resurface and unpack all of that, it is extremely difficult. I think it was the Pope who said, this was like a few years ago, I don't remember what year, but there was an apology made to the Jewish community. And the apology was about the Holocaust. But the point is that he finally said it, right? And he recognized that there was the anti-Semitism that was happening, and all of the rockets, the 5,000 rockets that were launched, and Israel was responded. And there was another group, the UN said, you should have never done that. Shame on you. You shouldn't have responded and retaliated, because there is a right to defend oneself. And I was like, wow, that makes me uncomfortable, right? Am I safe? Because it does impact the American people. They view Israel, they have their eyes on Israel. They look at the Jewish community. So I have to say, it's extremely nerve-wracking. And then if you look at the Ukraine situation that's going on, and now we're saying we need to denazify Ukraine. What does that mean? What does that really mean? So now if we had a different president under the Jewish community, would that issue have come up? I don't know.
Yes, this is Yehoshua. I just wanted to add Portugal. I don't know how to
Portugal, yeah.
sign it this way. Okay. So they're the European champions for soccer tournament. And I was there. There was a game that happened, and there was one person that sat down next to me, was talking to me. And they said, hey, have you seen the war in Ukraine? What do you think? There's a Jewish president. Do you think the war happened for that reason? And I said, what do I even have to do with the war? Just because I'm Jewish, therefore I know all about the war. So I said that. And they said, oh, okay. They started backpedaling. And I said, I don't understand what one has to do for the other, but just seeing that he thought that way, that it's still there.
Right? It's Jewish community's fault. It's the Jewish conspiracy. It's, underlying issues because they're Jewish. They're responsible for that. It's all connected in some way, unfortunately, in some of the things that people think. And it's really painful. It really makes me think, I am Jewish, but I wonder, what's true and what's not.
Hmm. This is Sophia. I don't feel safe when Ukraine started, when they were at war, and I just remembered. I started thinking about if there are any subliminal messages that are hidden in there. The whole idea of being Nazified, because I know Russia has a long history of pretty much. Ukraine has a huge Jewish population there,
Yeah.
and I question it. I question what's next, because the war came out of the blue. It was by surprise. And I was thinking, is US safe even? Anything's possible. Jewish people are always going to be the minority, always.
Mhm.
And we're never going to be safe and have things stable. And for Jewish people to be ready to defend ourselves, of course, the majority will blame us for even wanting to defend ourselves. I remember a couple of years ago, there was a huge increase in hate crimes. So, for example, in Pittsburgh, there was a shooting in a temple.
Yes. Hmm.
And there was a lot of people that destroyed some tombs. And while there was the Black Lives Matter protest, there's a lot of swastikas being spray painted on walls. We want to bring awareness and recognition and say, stop this anti-Semitism. And at the same time, we want to support people that are in the Black Lives Matter movement. So when I show my support and post something, I have my husband or people saying, why don't you support the Jewish community and speak out against anti-Semitism? And really, we all deserve this recognition. We all deserve human rights.
That's right.
Asian hate crimes that have been going on for so many, that's something we should speak out against. And we don't see the media bring up people that are murdering Jewish families, but they'll bring up other things about other families that are going on. So still to this day, things like this are happening.
This is why I'm extremely grateful to have you here today to really show and share these painful and very authentic experiences. So people here today are watching, you may be what we call pass as white individuals, but you don't feel safe. You do feel marginalized. You do feel oppressed. And that is obviously not okay. We don't tolerate that elsewhere. So why should you? Definitely not. I do want to throw out one important thing that I don't think people realize is that not all Jewish people are white.
Exactly. That's right.
I remember when I traveled to Mexico, I went to Mexico City and I met so many Jewish people there in Mexico City. And I know that there's a lot of Jewish Black individuals too. There's Jewish Asian individuals too. So it is out in the community. They're not necessarily just one color. I wanted to talk about the Whoopi Goldberg situation in media recently.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead, Ellen.
Is Whoopi Goldberg, it was a couple of months ago, did make a statement saying that she felt so bad with what was going on in Europe. And there was the German people destroyed the Jewish people. And it was wrong. And it took them 2 weeks to unpack, because Jewish people, they are not considered as white in Europe or anywhere globally except for in America. They're white passing, but really historically, Jewish people have never been seen as white. We are Semites. So anti-Semitism, that's where the term comes from. And we come from the Middle East, and historically, there's a lot of hatred towards the Semites or Jewish people. So people would recognize, oh, you're Jewish. But then when we moved to the States, we assimilated and became known as or seen as white. So Whoopi Goldberg did make a statement saying we were white, but we're really not. And Hitler said that Jewish people are the inferior race. He called Jewish people that. That's why he tried to commit genocide against Jewish people so he could continue the Aryan race, keep white supremacy with blonde hair, blue eyes, and keep the Nazi German look. Jewish people had darker skin and curly hair and did not look white. So that was the perspective in Nazi Germany. And so I want to make sure that everyone knows and sees and understands what was happening. I remember when I went to rabbi school, I learned a lot. And I realized that the language of love is the most beautiful thing when they teach about love and justice and fairness throughout the world. Even there was this Jewish congressman who wrote a civil rights law for Black people because Jewish people were slaves at one time. So we wrote that law in full support of the Black community. And I still don't understand why anti-Semitism still continues to this day, even with all that I've learned.
And I have to agree 100%. I don't even understand. Often, as a Jewish individual, we hear things and they contradict one another. Some people will say, go back to Israel. Or they may say, oh, no, Jewish people shouldn't be in Israel. They should go back to Europe where they come from. Well, where am I from? Israel or Europe? You know, people will say we should kill the Christians and destroy Christians, and they're Jewish and they love and they're Christian themselves. There's just so many conflicts that it's like it's crazy out there. And I look at this like, why do you hate me so much? Like, why do you blame us for everything? You know, it's this way or that way, and still the roles get flipped.
That's right. I agree. It doesn't make sense at all. And you mentioned recently that in Israel, just yesterday, there were 4 Jewish people that were stabbed.
Yes, there were 4 Jewish people who.
So that's happening even in Israel.
They were killed. They were murdered.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Just walking out, shopping. They were Jewish. They weren't in a Jewish community, and because they were Jewish, they were stabbed and killed.
This is
in
Palestine.
Palestine terrorist here, yeah.
So it was a hate crime. Is that right? This is Ellen.
Yeah, a hate crime. But then again, I'm sure Ellen and Sophia will agree. I mean, we have been through so many different anti-Semitism throughout history. You have pharaohs who ruled Egypt. You've got just, in our Bible, it speaks to throughout history, we've tolerated a lot. But then again, we also have gratitude because it's given us holidays. It's given us survival, right? And it's all thanks to these people that we do celebrate who we are, right? Agreed?
Yes, Jewish people still practice their religion, and we haven't become bitter.
Yes.
We still to this day share our love and light. We still celebrate. We uplift human rights and other cultures that are all throughout the world. So I'm still proud to be Jewish, regardless of what we've gone through. We've still stayed strong.
Yeah, and as stated, just Jewish, the language of love, the justice, the Passover every year. Remember, we were slaves, and remembering that we need to forgive. Absolutely. And that we practice forgiveness. And I remember where I come from and I understand. So I'm able to then help others to be free like us, because I understand that people from my home area of Brooklyn wrote the civil rights law, plus 16 rabbis went to march with Martin Luther King in Alabama. 16 rabbis were all arrested. And the Brooklyn community raised money to get them out of the jail. And you see this white man walking with MLK in pictures, and he's really not a white man. He was a Jewish rabbi.
Well, I know this is a loaded topic, and it's impossible to really get really deep in 30 minutes, but I'm so glad to have you all here today with us. And it's really a great start to this dialogue. And I'm sure it just scratched the surface, but I'm hoping people who watch this realize that it still exists and it's not okay. And all of you, just like any other minority group, deserve us to stand with you in solidarity, to honor your humanity as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Melissa, for your beautiful closing statement. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. You know, maybe it's not easy to say everything that you did today, but I want to sincerely thank you three for being here today.
And thank you for the opportunity.